Hello and welcome back to Read Becca. This is my weekly catch up on everything I've read, I'm currently reading, and general update on what's going on with me. So I have a problem. I am incapable of not picking up too many books from the library. As much as I want to read my own stuff, I just can't stop myself. So I was having, I think, just a little bit of a bad day and went to the library branch that's a little bit farther away. It's like 10 minutes away versus 2 minutes away. And I don't go there as often, obviously, because I have one closer. And so it had a lot of books that I don't see regularly when I'm browsing, and so I just went a little overboard. So I'm just going to run through what I picked up quickly and not really give synopsis or anything, because assuming I do read these, if they don't have to go back, hopefully, I will talk about them more then. So the first one I picked up was If Then by Kate Hope Day. This is kind of literary sci-fi that is following people in this town where they start to see all of the possibilities, like the multiple outcomes if they had made different choices. That sounds real interesting. And The Bird King by G. Willow Wilson. This is a fantasy that is set on the Iberian Peninsula, so historical fantasy around the time of the newly formed Spanish monarchy. And those two are on my 2021 Goodreads list, so those are from my goals. that list that I have done terribly at getting to. Then I have Winter Counts by David Heska, Wanbli, Weiden, and Leave the World Behind by Rumaan, and both of those are big thrillers that have been very popular lately. So I don't really want to know too much going into either of those, but they grabbed my attention. Then I have the weirdest one that I picked up. I picked up Red Wheelbarrow. And you can see it's intentionally designed to have this damage. It's really intriguing to see on the shelf because it doesn't have anything. It looks like an actual notebook. It's handwritten. So this, I discovered, is a tie-in to Mr. Robot, the TV show. I picked it up. It's a short little read. It sounds really interesting. I've only watched season 1 of the show, so I'm hoping this doesn't spoil anything. It looked like it probably wouldn't. So an interesting kind of odd one. That one is all about this slightly unhinged hacker. So I think it'll be maybe a near thriller type read. And then I picked up That Person Who Rudely Stole Volume 4 when I was getting to it. Also rudely stole 5 and 6. So they had these checked out through December, which was the maximum, and then fortunately they brought them back early, so I thought I wasn't going to be able to get them, so I grabbed both. I did actually already read Volume 5, so I will talk about that in a minute, but yeah, so I have a problem with picking up too many library books, and I can't stop myself. I do have a week off at the end of the month, and so it's possible that I could read all of this before I need to go back. So jumping into stuff I did read this week. I read Volume 5 of Descender. This one was really, really action-packed, but the art seemed a little bit more I don't know, more painterly than it was before, almost like it was still in draft stage. So I thought it was fine. There were definitely some really iconic pictures from this one that I liked. I'm really looking forward to the next volume because it was left on a cliffhanger at the end of this one, so I'm very glad I don't have to wait for that to come out. So then, in books, I finished up, or in audio actually, I finished up Illuminae, and this one is big epic space opera. I liked it. It has a evil corporation, it's got rogue AI, it's got a virus outbreak, a really mindfucky virus outbreak, and the primary characters are two people who broke up fairly recently and aren't quite over it, on 2 different ships, trying to deal with this situation that they're in where everything is going wrong. And so because of that relationship, that is a pretty big element to this, and that made me not love it, honestly. I just found it really immature, and was not invested in them at all. I think you have to really be invested in them to love this as a new favorite. For me, this was very cool in terms of the mixed media style. This is all told in recordings and notes, that sort of thing. So that's really neat, and I do intend to continue on. It was fun, popcorn sci-fi. And the other one was kind of the exact opposite, like almost zero action. I read The Cabinet by Eun-Soo Kim and translated by Shanlin Halbert. And this is a South Korean novel that I think was released quite a while ago and just got translated. So this was an arc. It has come out now, so it should be available. But it tells the story of this man who has a job that is very boring. He literally just sits there all day, doesn't get any work assigned to him at all, but feels very guilty about that. And eventually, out of his boredom, he breaks into the cabinet that sits nearby him because it's locked, and he's never seen anybody use it. And he starts reading the files in the cabinet and realizes that they are these accounts of people who have oddities about them. So the cabinet is full of these people who have things like their body has changed, they are jumping in time, they just have strange qualities to them. And one of the people he talks to is very determined to become a cat because the woman that he loves doesn't really feel connection to humans. She just loves cats. So he's determined that he truly can become a cat. So there are those things that they're just weird people. And there's other ones like a man who has a tree growing from his finger, where they are actually kind of, supernatural. So through all of that, there is an underlying like anti-capitalist and worker exploitation story to this, because in the subtle parts, the man that has a tree growing from his finger really is worn down at work and he hates his job, and having the tree to care for, eventually he moves his seat near the window. He starts taking better care of himself and eventually leaves his job, and then kind of leaves all the things that were keeping him in a rut. And so things like that are fairly inconsequential. That guy does keep coming back up throughout the narrative. So that's one of the stories that is less of a vignette. But overall, most of these little side stories about these people don't really connect back to the main story. So I wound up really liking the stories in these little vignettes aside from the cabinet more than the main story. And the main story was very slow paced. I liked that fine. I like really slice of life stuff, but it didn't really coalesce into a point until the end, and then at the end it ramped up so quickly, like mourning for there being torture. It wasn't super graphic, but there is torture in here, and it was interesting to be reading this right now. I guess I'll mention it now. In my entertainment this week, I watched Squid Game, and that is also a Korean show and has very similar themes, where there is this really burnout culture where we have a lot of people that are just extremely overworked, or one mistake just buries them and then they go on to a spiral. So through these stories, we see the main character has gone through some very similar things. And this is definitely not as dramatic as Squid Game. It was pretty violent. Like, I liked it. I'm not into super graphic violence. It's a lot of like shooting and stabbing type stuff, so nothing really super gruesome. So I was able to make it through that show, and I really enjoyed it. This one, I feel like it didn't quite come together, but I liked it a lot, and would definitely read more from the author. So then I had a book that was included in the library haul, but since I already read it, I mentioned here. This is A Psalm for the Wild Built by Becky Chambers, the new Monk and Robot, hope punk, mundane, slice of life-y story. This is all about a monk, Dex, who was serving in the garden always in the past, and didn't really feel settled in that, needs a change. And so they decide to leave the monastery and go travel around as a tea monk, even though they have no training doing that. And so they become this tea monk and travel from village to village and serve tea and listen to people. So it's really more of a therapy job. And they wander into the woods one day and meet a robot. So in this world, half the world has been split, where humans live on one side and everything else gets the other side. And the robots became sentient and just kind of everybody agreed they would walk away. So nobody has really interacted with robots in a long time. So this is really all about Dex and this robot, Mosscap, who are having an exchange of ideas as they walk along through the woods. And so it's very peaceful. For me, I have to say that having just read Bewilderment, this gets across the themes that it was trying to so much better. Like this nails the connectedness of all things. It really nails the differences in being so well. So I loved this. And like there are so many powerful passages that are just like simple, quiet moments. This one I noted. So it's is correct then? You wouldn't prefer they or, oh, no. Those sort of words are for people. Robots are not people. We're machines, and machines are objects. Objects are its. I'd say you're more than just an object, Dex said. The robot looked a touch offended. I would never call you just an animal, sibling Dex. It turns its gaze to the road, head held high. We don't have to fall into the same category to be of equal value. So just great little moments there. The other thing that I think this tackles, possibly I could be misreading, but I saw notes in there of talking about coming from a privileged place, I think, where Dex is trying their best to be sensitive to the robot in a way that's uninformed. And so because they're having such an open dialogue, the robot can correct Dex, and that's great. But it's kind of like you're trying to accommodate this robot and doing it in a way that is not helpful and is actually, hurting things, and so maybe offensive. So I think that really mirrors certain things that people do when they're, we're talking about social justice. And so I thought that was really insightful. So overall, this is an absolute favorite. I've been, clamoring for a book like the Tea Dragon Society, but for adults, and this definitely has those vibes. So loved it. And finally, on my list of things I read this week, I finished up The Lost Village by Camilla Sten, and I enjoyed this a lot. I think this is probably a 4-star. It wasn't quite perfect, a little bit slow paced. So this is definitely fit into thriller over horror, and that was what I was hoping for from it, because my others turned out to be really horror. So this was from my TBR for this month, and I found it so innovative because this kind of is Blair Witchy. It starts with having like a Kickstarter post basically for this documentary. So we've got a small documentary crew going to this lost village, and Alice is running this because some of the people in the crew have connections back to the village where the entire village disappeared except for a baby and a body. And this was hundreds of people in this old mining village. The mine had shut down and the village was struggling. So, there were theories that the people had just walked away. But so this crew is going there to see if they can uncover any missed details in the decades in between since this has happened. And so in addition to some of the people having connections back to the village, some of the people have personal baggage with each other, and so that creates a lot of tension as well. So those two things really are coming up in the now portion of the story, and we only get that through Alice's perspective. But then we have a history, a then portion of the story that is looking back at two people from the village that lived there at the time when the disappearance happened, just before and leading up to this disappearance. And so we get the two perspectives are Elsa and Ina, and Elsa is the older woman and Ina is her daughter. So then this charismatic preacher shows up in the village and is there to take the place of their current preacher, and nobody really knows him though, or where he's come from, and increasingly the village gets swept up in his message. And so there's this potential religious element. So things as this goes along go increasingly more and more wrong, as you would expect, and they kind of dismiss a lot of it. They just laugh it off, shrug it off, like no big deal. But eventually they do get into pretty tough situations. So yeah, I will leave that part there in terms of not talking more about the plot, but I found that really innovative in splitting the two timelines was really done well. And then the fact that they're researching this, and because they have these connections back, they have some letters from within the village and notes, that sort of thing, from people who lived there. And so those are on the page in here as well. So it's got a little bit of mixed media, but not too much. And then getting the historical perspective and seeing it kind of as it happens and play out, it was really, really great. So that was done very well. Some of the things just didn't make sense. Like they do things that are not very, very smart or rational, of course. And I mean, totally inconsequential. Obviously things are going wrong. At one point they need food. And so they start looking through cupboards in these abandoned houses from decades ago to find something to eat. And it's like, but do you really want to eat that? Even if you find canned food, whatever, you really want to eat that? I don't think so. Number one. And then number two, nobody cleared this out in the decades since, but beyond that, it had been less than a day. So if barring medical problems, underlying issues that you have, the average person can go a couple days without food without worrying, and they have not reached that point yet at all, and they're scrounging around for food. So yeah, that broke my immersion a little bit, but overall I liked it. I thought it was exactly the right level of spooky thriller that I was looking for. So this actually really hit the vibe I was looking for, even though I liked the other book that I read, The Twisted Ones, better. That was way more horror than I was prepared for. So that is what I read. So then I will be getting to Descender Volume 6 this weekend. I also did get back the Book of Accidents, and I am going right along. I'm halfway through. So really loving this. This is way horror. This is completely horror, not what I was expecting. So, and this is King-esque horror. So there's outright magic in here. It's the kitchen sink sort of thing where everything you can imagine that's a horror element is in here. Yeah, so I'm really liking this. Still, I need to finish that in this week because it's got more holds waiting for it. So I do have other stuff going on, but I've already talked enough, I think. So you've already seen most of the other stuff that's going. So I did also on audio get my hold for The Storyteller by Dave Grohl from the Foo Fighters. He just finally released a memoir, and so I'm listening to it on audio, read by himself, and it sounds like there are exclusive sound clips of stuff that he did early work. So that's going to be exciting. So I just barely started that this morning. So in life stuff, I think the only thing really going on is that the weather has finally changed. We're finally into fall, and thank goodness. We had that weird day yesterday where the temperature actually gets colder over the course of the day instead of warmer, and we've had several gray, rainy days, and now today it's just lovely and fall and crisp, and I've got my long sleeves on, so that's very exciting to me. They took some trees. The city cut down all the trees almost on my side of the street, so I'm very, very sad about that. I'll throw footage in of those at the end, but like I'm guessing it is, we had ash borer disease and they took trees last year on the opposite side of the street, so I'm guessing this was a continuation of that. But it's devastating to see all, like there's a whole row of them gone. Fortunately, I have 2 big trees in my yard that are still there, and then the one that would be on city property in front of my house as well is staying, it looks like. So I'm happy about that, but they took a lot of trees. And so they will, I'm sure, plant some more, but they'll be little tiny guys and won't be very much there for a long time. These ones were really big, huge, old trees. And it's a bummer that, like, right now we're getting ready to have the leaves changing and they're gone. But I do always complain because I have so many leaves, because my 2 trees in my yard are huge and very leafy. So this will be last leaves for me to clean up this year, I guess. Yeah. So I think that's, oh, I did get my David Mack art. I had bought quite a bunch of David Mack art, and Chris Riddell is right behind me, art a few months ago now, I think, and I finally framed it and hung it. Yeah, so the one is Chris Riddell behind me and all of the David Mack is together straight in front of me, so I will insert a clip of all of that hung at the end as well, so you can see how great it is. I'm so excited. Yeah, so I think that's it for that stuff. For recommendations this week, I have the Library of Alexandria. Alan did a interview with Josiah Bancroft, who is an author that I loved, and Josiah wrote Senlin Ascends, the Books of Babel series, and he's someone that's, you know, I love his writing. It's very, very poetic, and he talks about his history as a poet as well there, as a failed poet. And yeah, it was just a great time to watch, and so I will link that down below. I also noticed that Rhea from the Book Finch started a new book club, the Shorts and Swords? I can't remember. But regardless, it's an SFF short story club where they are planning on doing like an anthology and a magazine alternated month by month. And so that sounds really fun. So I will link that down below as well. So I think that's it for me this week. Thank you all so much for watching.